Don's got a topic that
I've got a
we need to
topic.
talk to.
Yet another failures of Christianity.
All right.
This will be number 26.
There's that many failures?
Yeah.
Do you see any end in sight?
No, I don't see any end
I
in
didn't
sight.
think you did.
Right. So maybe on the 50th show, and the what is it, Golden anniversary, I'll list them all just for entertainment. But you can go look in our archives and see a lot of the shows there. So today the show is on lame rationalizations, and much of apologetics, or much of the interaction that atheists have with Christian apologetics is script-based, in the sense that apologists are generally prepared for common and obvious questions based on their assertions, and over time their script gets extended and expanded to cover various things. And a perfect example of this is the problem of evil, which was posed by Epicurus in 300 BC, roughly, and quite a long time ago. And essentially it boils down to, why would an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent God allow evil? Fine question. Well, the answers to this age-old question have been gathered together, and they're called theodicies, and the answers are really lame rationalizations that have gotten some traction over time. They've been around a while, and they've kind of gotten to a more elevated status. And one of the theodicies said, well, God asserts, one of the theodicies asserts that God allows free will so he can play judge, and it effectively blames humanity for all the evils on the world, and God is perfect and humans are horrible. So there are many problems with this, and I don't want to necessarily go into it, but this whole idea of the script is pretty interesting. And one of the entertaining things to do if you're an atheist is to get the Christians off their script. And this forces them to think about what they're saying instead of just quoting dogmas. And different people will necessarily answer differently, which shows that Christianity and all religions are really not based on an objective truth. They're making it up as they go. So here's an example, a non-religious example. In Star Trek, we know that Spock's blood is green, but what color is his earwax? Well, it's not on the script. We don't know. So any answer is necessarily made up and not part of the Star Trek canon, which is not a big deal. Fiction, we know, is necessarily incomplete, and it's fiction, and it's just something that's missing, okay? And if you provide different answers, it extends the fiction in a different way. So, you might have, a Star Trek variant that goes off with green earwax and purple earwax, that sort of thing. And that's kind of what's happened to Christianity over the years. So here are some off-the-script questions for Christians. Did Adam have a belly button? Okay, and both answers have problems. How did Adam and Eve have grandchildren without incest? Who made the rule that sin had to be atoned with the blood sacrifice? And if it wasn't God, then God's having some trouble with this rule maker. Was Jesus intentionally or mistakenly killed by God? Both of the answers have problems. Does God torture embryos that don't implant? Both answers have problems. Do twins share a soul? Keep in mind that twinning happens after conception. Whatever answer you give there has problems. Why would God create such a large universe for the sake of humanity? Atheists are familiar with these sorts of questions because they kind of come up, but theists generally aren't prepared for them because they're off their script. So what kind of answers do you get? Well, you generally get lame rationalizations when you get these sorts of questions out, or any sort of challenging question, and these answers tend to be poorly thought out, easily destroyed, and generally Christians will realize this and try to change the subject. And lame rationalizations can be categorized into three categories. I'm going to mention three categories today. One is assert a claim about God, a platitude, or intellectual bankruptcy. Well, one type of answer is to assert a claim about God. Well, back to the problem of evil, Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz, who was one of the big intellects of that time, asserted that ours was an optimal universe among all the possible worlds, and that was his lame rationalization. So he asserted that ours was, this is really the best that can possibly be done. So that was him asserting a claim about, what God could do. And Voltaire answered with another leading intellect of that time, answered with the novella Candide, which was a parody of that claim. And in that book, in that novella, Pangloss, who takes Leibniz's position, rationalizes that syphilis, a new world disease he had contracted, was a necessary trade for the old world getting chocolate and cochineal, from which carmine dye comes, from the new world. So it's a sad parody that, we got syphilis, but it was okay because we got chocolate and this other thing that was, which made it okay, and that was the best possible world. And of course, this is just absurd and a silly, and so Voltaire was using mockery as an effective counterbalance to this lame rationalization that Leibniz came up with. And that's a good way to do it. Today we have a more modern way of doing it, which is Hitchens' razor, Christopher Hitchens. What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And there's no reason to apologize for that. Just say, since you don't have any evidence for this claim, I'm going to ignore it. Platitudes are another thing that you often hear from Christians when their beliefs are challenged or when they get cornered. And I have a long list of them. And most of them are really just like fingers on a chalkboard for atheists. God helps those that help themselves is one you might hear. And from an atheist perspective, you do it yourself, but God will gladly steal the credit for it. You hear that God will provide. Well, how about you provide now and let your God reimburse you later? Let's make the accounting work out properly for everybody. God will never give you more than you can handle. Or if God does give them more than they can handle, he's in a better place now.
It's a test.
It's a test, right? That's another one. Yeah, God's testing you.
Whatever God doesn't kill you with makes you stronger.
Right. Let go and let God. Jesus died for your sins. Everything happens for a reason. God works in mysterious ways. That's my personal favorite, which is basically a complete cop-out. I can't make sense of your crazy religious claims either. Ask and ye shall receive. There's a whole bunch of these that you'll hear, and they're really, if you unpack them, you'll find that they're lame rationalizations. They even a lot of Christians don't want people to use them. Another category of answer you're going to get is intellectual bankruptcy, and this happens when people get cornered. And they often just resort to this to get out of the argument. And they'll say things like, "Well, with God, all things are possible," which is really an intellectual cop-out, saying that that your universe is so fungible and flexible that there's really no rules anymore except for what you think your God's going to do. There's another one: God said it, I believe it, and God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. You've heard that a lot too. So both of these are statements made by someone who has abandoned reason and evidence and who've kind of given up on the reality. Another one you hear commonly is you just got to have faith. And of course, faith is nothing more than a good way to be wrong. It's tantamount to gullibility as far as I'm concerned. So generally, when you hear people saying these things, they're clues that they've drunk too much of the Kool-Aid and you can't waste too much time to get them to see the light. So you might want to turn your attention elsewhere. So in conclusion, it's relatively easy to get Christians off the script, and that's the way to argue with them, because it forces them to think. And if they give you lame rationalizations, well, they're lame because they show little or no thought, and they're rationalizations because they're clearly made up by people to compensate for a God that isn't there to help them. And these demonstrations, these demonstrate that there's little objective truth to the religion and only a collection of stories and ossified dogma. And this is yet another failure of Christianity. So that was it for today.
Woot.
Okay.
I have a feeling we'll be addressing this further.
Yeah, call in with your favorite lame rationalizations. That'd be fun.